Hi, everybody. Welcome to Phil and Dave's Excellent Adventures. Just Dave here. Today I'm talking about the movie The Boy and the Heron. This is going to be a spoiler review, so if you haven't seen the movie yet and you are concerned about spoilers, I'll suggest go and watch the movie first before you watch this review. So The Boy and the Heron is Hayao Miyazaki's latest film, perhaps his last film. It's about a young boy whose mother passed away, and he's dealing with her death as well as the death of his, or the arrival of his new stepmother. So, as far as what I liked about the movie, I liked Luca Padovan as Mahito, the main kid. I didn't know him from anything else, but he was good. He did a good job. I really liked Robert Pattinson as the Gray Heron. He's doing a completely different voice than his normal voice. It's kind of weird, kind of, and it works. I really liked it. It was fun. Karen Fukuhara as Himi was great as well. I like Gemma Chan as Natsuko. Mark Hamill, of course, always great. He's in here as the grand uncle. I love Florence Pugh, and again, she's doing a different voice than her usual one, kind of a more husky kind of voice as Kiriko. She's great. I like Willem Dafoe, of course. He's always good as the noble penguin. Dave Bautista as the parakeet king. And then Mahmoudou Athie, Tony Revolori, and Dan Stevens as the parakeets were good as well. I really like the score by Joe Hisaishi. He's done pretty much every Miyazaki movie since Nausicaa, The Valley of the Wind. I really like the character designs in this too. I mean, of course, Miyazaki always has great characters and has great character designs, but I really like the look of the nannies or the grannies, the maids, I guess, but the old women, the 6 or 7 old women who hang out. I really like the look of them and their design, as well as the design of all the other characters and the animals through here. And the design of the heron itself is super weird and creepy. The way it's got sort of teeth, and as it goes on, this is a spoiler review, there's like a person essentially, I think, living inside of it. All that stuff, very cool. I really like the story. The overall story itself is very good, always interesting. Miyazaki has an interesting way of telling stories, and I appreciated the themes of the story, which to me at least was really all about this boy dealing with the loss of his mother, and then also accepting that his father had remarried a new woman who was actually his mother's younger sister. So yeah, all of that was really interesting. And Miyazaki, just all of his movies are always very beautiful. And a lot of times when I'm watching them, I just get distracted by the art style itself, the sort of hand-drawn paintings for the backgrounds and even the foreground sometimes, and just the look of it, and just the overall sort of setting and the feeling and the tone of it. And this movie succeeds as all of his do. There's a reason that he's so highly regarded. And yeah, this movie is a great example of that. And if it is his last movie, it's a pretty good movie to go out on. And definitely, if you haven't seen his other movies, I would highly recommend watching the rest of them. Howl's Moving Castles, One Everyone Loves, Spirited Away won the Academy Award, and I really like My Neighbor Totoro. But as far as what I disliked about this movie, I pretty much liked all the voices, and I don't mind that they cast sort of famous American actors in the movie, but Christian Bale as Soichi was sort of interesting to me, just because he's doing an accent that I think is closer to his natural kind of Welsh accent. But to me, it came across sometimes as almost like a Japanese impression, and I'm like, well, that's weird. I don't think it was. I think it was just he speaking with his sort of normal kind of Welsh accent, which is the way he talks. But to me, it was just like a little out of place, because I'm sure I don't know anything about Japan, honestly. There may have been Japanese businessmen in 1945 with British or Welsh accents, but just to me, it came across a little weird. And overall, the movie itself is weird. Miyazaki does some weird stuff. And something with, like, say, My Neighbor Totoro with like the cat bus is weird in like a cool, kind of fun, interesting, like kid-friendly kind of way. There's some weird stuff in here that's just straight up weird. Like I said, the whole guy living inside the heron thing is just a creepy thing. And I don't know if they do explain it. I don't really know. I kind of missed their explanation of it. So I'm just like, what's going on? Was this guy like cursed, or is this just his deal, or this is what he does? Or I don't understand. Well, I guess he was from like the dream realm. Like, so I don't know. The movie is long. It's a little over 2 hours, 2 hours and 4 minutes long. And I think maybe just with me, I'm used to animation being a little shorter. So when you get into a 2 hour length for an animated movie, to me, it ends up feeling even longer than 2 hours. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, especially with something that's so well done, but it definitely is a little long to me for an animated movie. And it's definitely not very, kid friendly. Whereas some of his other stuff, like My Neighbor Totoro or Ponyo, are pretty kid friendly. This is probably more closer to The Wind Rises. Is that the one? I haven't seen it. Or some of his more, I guess, Princess Mononoke is a little more serious. Yeah. And the movie is a little confusing. I've definitely seen a lot of critics or just people say they were confused by it or they didn't get it, they didn't understand it. I think the grandfather or grandson of the man who wrote the book that it's based on said he was kind of confused by it. And I think even Miyazaki himself said he didn't really understand it, which is weird because I'm like, I feel like I mostly got it, or at least I understood the main kind of thing about the kid and his stepmother. Yeah, maybe some of the stuff with the granduncle and the whole dream realm and how that fit in and what the point was there. I was a little confused on, but yeah. And I think, this movie could be accused of being maybe a little boring. And I think it's true of a lot of Miyazaki movies, not necessarily boring, but just like there's a way that they're, I guess, deliberately paced or slow, but just also, I don't know, he always sets very comfortable kind of moods where it's there's a lot of just slow shots of like establishing shots or just of a character walking, slowly. And there's like a lot of silent kind of shots or just montages with music. And then there's also a lot of like sleeping and a lot of eating in a lot of his movies. So like once you get all of that, there's definitely sleeping and eating in this. It's yeah, it's just it creates this sort of warm, friendly, comfortable kind of environment where, yeah, I feel like watching this movie, there's definitely points where I started to I didn't fall asleep, but I started to kind of want to drift off. And I've ran into that with a couple of his movies, mostly because I usually watched them in bed, I guess. But yeah, and I do think the pacing is a little odd. And again, sort of, this is becoming a critique of all of his movies because I watched them all recently. But yeah, it's definitely, I think with a lot of his movies too, the pacing is a little odd because you kind of start out, you establish the characters, and then a lot of times he'll kind of just spend a long time in this world, just kind of living in the world and kind of showing what it's like, which is cool and I appreciate it. But it feels like sometimes the actual like inciting incident or the actual like antagonist doesn't really appear until later. And then a lot of times it seems like the plot threads are kind of just solved pretty quickly at the end. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, but just I guess not what I'm used to. Other than that, the movie is directed by Hayao Miyazaki. He's done Howl's Moving Castle, Kiki's Delivery Service, My Neighbor Totoro. Also written by Hayao Miyazaki, but based on a book called How Do You Live? I'll talk about that more later. Budget on this one is hard to say. I couldn't figure it out. According to the producer, though, it was the most expensive film ever produced in Japan. If that's true, the previous most expensive film, The Tale of Princess Kaguya, was $64 million. When converted for inflation. So this movie may have cost 70, 80, $100 million. I don't know. Box office on it though pretty good. It's made $12.8 million domestic opening. And I've heard 97 worldwide. I've also heard 84 million worldwide. So maybe that's not including the US. That would make sense, I guess. Either way, about 100 million, it sounds like worldwide. 56 million of that was in Japan. Number one at the box office domestically, the first Studio Ghibli movie to do so. I also read someone say the first original anime to do so, but I don't know if that's true because I don't know if this is necessarily original or not. And I also feel like there's, well, either way. Rotten Tomatoes in this one really good. Critics are at 96%, audience at 90%. So I think, again, it seems like from what I've heard, there are some people who are just like, I didn't get it. What's going on? What was the point here? But I think most people who are more familiar with Miyazaki are like, hey, it's not necessarily about the point. It's kind of the journey, not the destination kind of thing. So yeah, the film's original working title was How Do You Live, which is what the translated title of the original book is from. The book was written in 1937. Miyazaki said he really liked it. The Boy and the Heron, though, was not really a direct adaptation of the novel. So I don't know, in a way, it's kind of weird they changed the title because I think How Do You Live is maybe a more interesting, evocative title in some ways. But also, it is a different enough story. As far as I can tell, I haven't read the book. It sounds completely different. It's the boy in the book is like 15, and this kid is 12. He's got a different name in the book. He lives with his uncle. He's into like martial arts, and it's about bullying in school, which there's a little bit of that in this, but I don't really know. I honestly don't really see the connection between the two. It sounds like some similar themes, but it's sort of odd that they chose it as an adaptation. So in this movie, the protagonist, Mahito Maki, is modeled after Miyazaki and his childhood. His father, similar to the father in this, was employed by a company that manufactured airplanes or airplane components. His family also did have to evacuate the city to the countryside during the war. The hospital fire at the beginning is also similar to Miyazaki losing his mother, and his mother apparently it was a big inspiration for him, and the reason that so many of his movies have strong female characters and female protagonists a lot of times. Unlike this movie, though, Miyazaki didn't oversee every single frame, and he actually focused more on just creating the film's blueprint through storyboarding. And then the animation director, Takeshi Honda, who did Up on Poppy Hill and a bunch of other stuff. Took charge of the main kind of animation process. So with this one, it took Miyazaki a lot longer to animate it. Back in his younger ages, he used to be able to do like 10 minutes of animation every month. For this one, it was more like 1 minute of animation every month. They started working on this film in 2016, so it took like 7 years to make. He said this is his final movie, but he said that like 8 or 9 times before. I think the first time he said it was like in 1986 or something, probably after Nausicaa, I guess. But in this case, it might literally be his last. He's 83 years old now. So, I mean, even if he started working now, it might take him another 7 years to make another movie. And then he'd be 90. I mean, he might just die at some point. But maybe they can figure out a way to do something similar where he kind of storyboards and someone else can kind of take on the main part or finish it. I also found out that apparently he's got a son who makes movies, but they aren't as well regarded. I'm interested to check those out. But apparently in Japan, other than the official poster, there was no promotional material for the movie. They didn't release a trailer or anything like that. They just said like, it's I forgot his name already. Miyazaki. It's Miyazaki's last movie, and that's all they needed. Of course, I've seen trailers, so that they changed when they released it here. But yeah, it was also interesting in this movie. There's we've got Christian Bale showing up again, who was in Howl's Moving Castle, and then we got Robert Pattinson, who also played Batman. So we got 2 Batmans in here, and we also got Mark Hamill, who has played the Joker. So that's interesting. And then both those guys have worked with Christopher Nolan as well. So it's kind of an interesting connection. I noticed while watching Howl's, there's a point where he kind of yells and he sounds like Batman, Christian Bale. He sounds like Batman. And I'm like, hey, it's interesting. So yeah, as far as my score on this one, I think I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I thought it was great, really good. I really liked it, but I didn't love it. I think, maybe again, some of the pacing issues or just maybe it was a little too long for me or just a little too weird or a little too confusing. But overall, great. Not my favorite Miyazaki movie by any means, but definitely not my least favorite either. I think pretty solid and a pretty good, if it is his last movie, a pretty good movie to go out on. But if you saw the movie, let me know what you thought of it down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a great night. I will see you here again next week.